Hello members, we are again back in our lessons, and today our focus will be in biology. And biology I'm going to cover today is going to be A-level biology, and this biology is mainly from a topic known as transport. So transport is a wider topic, but specifically members I'm going to consider a subtopic of transport in animals, and this one is going to be what we are calling the cardiac cycle or the cardiac conduction. The keywords which are very, very vital if you are going to understand properly what I'm going to teach you, these keywords should be taken into consideration. One of the keywords, I'm going to look at the cardiac muscle, then the sun or the sinoatrial node, then we are going to look at what we call the atrioventricular node or the AVN. Then we have what we call the systole, then diastole, then the pacemaker. Those words should be observed critically. So by the end of this lesson, guys, try to make sure that you can at least state the role of the sun, the role of AVN. Then you should be capable of differentiating between systole and diastole. Now, from there, at least you will be knowing given the definition of systole and diastole. Don't forget that this is transport in animals, but we are picking a subtopic which we are calling the cardiac cycle. Now, the cardiac cycle mainly, we are going to consider the contraction of the heart as well as the relaxation of the heart. Remember, when the heart is contracting, that's when we say it is undergoing what we call the systole, and when it is relaxing is when we say it's undergoing what we call diastole. Members, you recall properly that the heart is the engine of the body. Why the heart is the engine of the body? The heart is pushing blood. Which blood? Remember, it carries the digested food materials, the respiratory gases, the waste products, and many other things like that. Now, to understand the heart properly and its contraction and relaxation, we have to know properly the morphology or the anatomy of the heart itself. Remember, the heart, to simplify the work, the heart we are seeing that is four-chambered. That one you are aware. And the four-chambered heart is having two sides, the left side and the right side. Now the sides are partitioned by what we call the atrioventricular septum. Now on top of that, the heart is having valves. Those valves, you remember, we have the valves known as the semilunar valves. Those ones are the pulmonary valves as well as the aortic valves. Then we have what we call the atrioventricular valves. Remember, those ones are bicuspid valves and the tricuspid what? Valves. Now, after knowing the parts of the heart, remember the heart is being occupied by meat. That meat which is there, or the muscle which is there, we are calling it the cardiac muscle. Don't forget that the cardiac muscle is a special type of muscle. Some biologists are saying it's a smooth muscle, but when you consider it properly, it is having its specific features. It is unique, as you know properly that its contraction is myogenic. When you look at the nuclei, it is multinucleated, as having intercalated discs, and so on. So you remember the teachers told you that other muscles can even be fatigued. This one cannot be fatigued. Now, to simplify, now let us go directly, but as we are moving directly, we are going to use that animation from that medical department. So we are using it to get a good picture of the heart we are talking about. Try to be observant on that video which is moving on your screen. So when we are going to understand the contraction of the heart and relaxation of the heart, we have to first consider two main points. One of them we are calling it the SAN or the sun. This point is found exactly around what we call the vena cava, the superior vena cava, at its entrance. Now this one we are calling the pacemaker. It initiates the contraction and relaxation of the heart. Remember, this sun, it produces electric excitation. Don't forget that even in animals, animals produce some electrical excitation, what you can call electricity. Our earth is having some volts. It produces volts. Don't become scared of our earth producing the electricity. Remember, even some other animals, they have those cells which produces electricity. Like other animals, we can specify like the dolphin fish, you know properly that it produce some electricity. You look at even electric eel, you know properly that it produces some electric current. So cells can be specialized to produce electricity or producing color and so on, producing smell and so on. So our heart is having a group of cells which make up what we call the pacemaker or the sun, which are capable of producing electrical excitation. Now, once that electrical excitation spreads all over the atria, those are the upper chambers of the heart, you'll find that the cardiac muscle is going to contract. Remember, the contraction of the cardiac muscle, contraction, the muscles are like they are pulling, they are squeezing, they are becoming small. As the cardiac muscles are in the atria are contracting, remember we said the heart is experiencing systole. What is the effect of the cardiac muscle in the atria contracting? The effect is going to be that as they contract, you will see that the electrical excitation will propagate all over the atria and the cardiac muscle contract. When they contract, the volume of the chambers decreases, and once the volume of the chambers decreases, we see scientifically that the pressure increases. You know, from principles of physics, when you increase when you reduce the volume, you increase the pressure. P is inversely proportional to V. Now, once you increase the pressure in our upper chambers, we see that the blood is going to be pushed into the ventricles. So you shall see that the oxygenated blood on your right hand side now will be pushed via the tricuspid valves into the right ventricle. Then you will discover that even on your left, the oxygenated blood will be pushed through the bicuspid valves into the left ventricle. But remember, those valves will open because of the pressure raised as a result of the contraction of the cardiac muscle and then blood going down. Now remember, once all the blood has been pushed through the ventricles, the valves must close. Now as the valves are closing, the atrioventricular valves, we see that the heart will produce the first sound, which you talked about, that the heart produces the first sound, and that sound will be recorded on the curves, which we shall see later, which we are calling the PCG or the phonocardiographs. Now, we are seeing all our blood has been pushed by atriosystole. The contraction of the atria, we are calling the atriosystole. What brought it? Production of electric excitation from the sun or the pacemaker, which did what? Propagated. After propagating, what happened? We see the volume of the chambers lowered or decreased, and the pressure increased, and DO on the right was pushed in the right ventricle, and then oxygenated on the left was also pushed down through the bicuspid valves into your left ventricle. Now from there, we are seeing that the excitation do not pass directly into the ventricles. God placed there an insulator, a membrane which does not allow the excitation to jump directly into the ventricles, but instead all of the excitation is collects at a point which you are calling the AVN. Try to look at the atrioventricular septum, it in the middle there. You will discover there is that AVN. That AVN, it is where all the excitation after the excitation of the atria collects. Why are we seeing that the first correct? God was a good scientist, a supreme one. He made sure that there must be a delay in the excitation of the ventricle before all of the blood moves downwards. So they can ask you that question, why is that the first correct? It was to create that delay, such that all of the blood is first pushed down in the ventricle, then the ventricles begin contracting. Otherwise, some blood will be moving up, another will be moving down because of that biological confusion, which God observed it as supreme and then simplified the work. Now, after all the excitation is have corrected at the AVN, members try to be attentive. the excitations will pass via the AVN bundles, or what we are calling the bundles of His. Now, these bundles of His are connected to other branches, which are calling the Purkinje fibers, or the Purkinje what? Fibers. These fibers will make sure that the excitation is from the upper part of the heart, which collected at the AVN, become propagated all over the ventricles. When they become propagated all over the ventricles, we see even the cardiac muscle in the ventricle contracts. When it contracts, the volume of the ventricles decreases. When the volume of the ventricles decreases, members, we see that the pressure of the ventricles is going to be higher, or increases, than the pressure in the atria. So what are we going to see? The increase in the pressure of the ventricles as a result of ventricular systole. Then now the contraction of the ventricles, guys, we are calling it the ventricular systole. Now, when the muscles, which are calling the meat in the ventricles, is contracting, the volume is decreasing, the pressure is increasing. Then the increased pressure pushes the blood on the right, that is the deoxygenated blood, into the pulmonary artery. Now, when blood is entering into the pulmonary artery, it must pass via what we call the pulmonary valves, which must be opened. And the pressure the blood gains from the right ventricle propels the blood into the lungs through the pulmonary arteries for oxygenation. Now, we are seeing that again, that is the blood after oxygenation, which will pass via pulmonary vein into now the left what? Atrium. Now, the blood on the left-hand side, which is oxygenated, will pass via the aortic valves, which are at the base of the aorta, into the aorta. Then, after gaining the pressure from the ventricle, that is the left ventricle, the blood will be propelled into the aorta, then the rest of the body parts. This is where other body structures will pick the blood. Take an example, the mesentery will take in the gastric region. Then we are seeing that the renal will take to the kidneys. We are seeing that the carotid, the jugular, and many femoral, and so on. So we are seeing that the main supplier is the aorta. Now we will discover that on the left side of the heart, the left ventricle is more muscular. The reason as to why it is more muscular, it is now to generate a bigger pressure that can propel the blood for a longer distance. Remember, the aorta is carrying the blood for a longer distance, the rest of the body parts. But when you look at the right ventricles, they are thinner. That because they are going to push blood for a shorter distance. Therefore, we are seeing that less pressure is generated on the right hand side to propel the blood to a shorter distance. That is from the heart, the lungs for oxygenation. Take note of that. They can ask you, why is it that the right hand side of the heart muscular, yet the left hand side is more muscular? Now, members, don't forget that we are talking about four-chambered heart. That is what we are calling now double-closed circulatory what?